Hey everyone, welcome to the Cheap Air Gunner channel. I'm Cherokee Steve. As far as things that are new, unfortunately there's not a whole lot. On the front of the 2400 KT, I have been notified by my nephew who lives in Wisconsin that he did receive the package with the gun, so it has arrived there. Unfortunately, you know, with the weather the way that it's been, I certainly haven't been able to work out a time frame to get up there to pick it up. I certainly don't expect him to have gone out of his way to have made the trip down here to drop it off. As soon as time and weather permits, one of those things will be happening and I'll have the gun. In the meantime, what I thought I would update on, a couple of just quick updates as far as the CO2 to HPA conversion. Everything is holding pressure really well. I haven't seen any drop whatsoever. It's been, you know, a while since I charged it up. So both the gauge showing the pressure in the bottle and the gauge showing the pressure in the valve are right where they were. So that's a good thing. The only other thing I could say is after having bled off some of the air out of the system and testing out the degassing apparatus that I had made up, I had to recharge and recharge the bottle on the HPA conversion kit. I had noticed, you know, that my pressure in my carbon fiber tank, my carbon fiber tank that's regulated to 2,900 PSI, had dropped down considerably, well under the 42 to 4,300 PSI I try to keep it charged at. So I did get it rehooked up to my cheap Young-Haing copy compressor and got that topped off. That all went well. Been a while since I had used the compressor, so glad to see that that held up well, is holding up well, and isn't giving me any issues whatsoever. That was a really good investment. But I thought in the meantime, one of the things I could do, I was going through some of the 22 caliber, you know, looking forward to getting the 2400 KT in my hands and knowing it's a 22 caliber gun. So going through some of the 22 caliber pellets that I have. And what I noticed is I have 3 different Crosman versions of 22 caliber pellets. And I thought maybe I could do a video on penetration test and deformation test. The 3 that I do have, this is the Crosman pointed airgun pellets. Another type that I have are the Crosman Destroyers, which is kind of a hollow point, a recessed hollow point with a pointed tip to it. And I also have, as very popular pellet, the Crosman Premier hollow points. Now, although none of the cans give a weight of the pellets in grains, it's pretty commonly known that, at least in the Crosman Premier hollow points, that they're 14.3 grain. I wasn't sure about the other two, the Crosman Destroyer or the Crosman Pointed. But having done some research online, from everything I can come across, they all are 14.3 grain pellets. So that's kind of a good platform to use, you know, as far as seeing any differences between the three, because it will pretty much come down to shape of the pellet and how that contributes to penetration and deforming of the pellet itself, which I plan to, you know, dig the pellets out of, count the number of pages. The textbook will have a hardcover, so hopefully, you know, it'll shoot completely through the hardcover and into the pages, see how many pages deep each pellet gets, dig the pellets out and see what they look like, and just keep everything on a fair, you know, consistent, level playing field. I'll be using my 2289 backpacker. I will use 35 pumps for each pellet, and we'll see what each can do. So let me get my range set up, and we'll get right to the shooting process. Again, we'll just see how far each pellet can get into the textbook and see what the pellets look like after digging them out, okay? So just hang on and we'll get straight to it. Okay, so on with the testing. I've already got the gun pumped up 35 times, and the first pellet I'm going to shoot, and I will go ahead and do it over the Crony and see how consistent numbers are, see if shape of the pellet affects velocity at all. As I said, I'll be using 35 pumps for each pellet. So the number of pumps and hopefully the, you know, pressure of air isn't going to vary too much. But the first one I was going to send over the Crony, and on target is the Crosman Pointed 14.3 grain pellets. Unfortunately, with the pointed pellet, I got an error reading from my chronograph. Hopefully that doesn't continue. We'll see what happens. But regardless of the velocity, again, what I'm concentrating on is the penetration within the textbook and deformation of the pellet. So, not really too concerned that the chronograph errored out as far as giving a velocity, but I don't have that for the pointed. Next one I'll try is the Crosman Destroyer, also in 14.3 grain. The last pellet I'll be sending downrange is the Crosman Premier hollow point. So, all three pellets have been shot downrange. First of all, I didn't get any velocities for any of the three. I got error readings from my Crony on all of them. So that's something I need to work on as far as my lighting and in relationship to what I use for my chronograph. getting back to the book itself, this is what I was shooting at. I covered up some previous holes that I had put in here with previous testing. But this one up here was with the first one, with the Crosman pointed. This one over here was with the Crosman Destroyer. And this one over here was with the Crosman Premier Hollow Point. Now, as far as accuracy goes, now this is only one shot. But what I did want to point out was I was basically shooting on center in each square. For these two, since it had the red line going across, I was shooting for the center of the red line. So basically over here with the Crosman pointed, I was trying to aim pretty much for this S, and I ended up putting it over here. Most likely that's on me. But just to point out that it was about 3/4 to an inch off where I was aiming. The Destroyer was pretty much dead on center. And the hollow point, without having a line or anything to go on, but just looking at the overall size of where I was shooting and just trying to put it relatively on center, also was extremely accurate. So, just wanted to point that out before tearing into the book and seeing penetration pellets. The other thing I wanted to point out was just my guesses, my opinions on what is going to show penetration-wise probably the best performance just based on shape and deformation. My guess is that the first one, we'll find out, but before I find out, just to throw my opinion out there, I was going to say as far as penetration, my guess is going to be the Crosman pointed, simply because of its shape. It's not an extremely sharp point, it's more of a rounded off point, but with that tapered head, aerodynamics, I have a feeling it would fly faster over the period of distance that I'm shooting, really cut through the air and not have as much air resistance as the other two. The only reason I would give that a guess above the hollow point would be that the hollow point is, although it's very much a domed shaped pellet, you know, it does have that little indentation in the head that I think would, you know, offer some more air resistance. Whether or not that proves out over a short distance like 10 yards, we'll find out. The one based on shape that I think is going to have the least penetration would be the Crosman Destroyer. It really has a wide hollow point head to it with a very sharp point, but I'm going to think that with that wide hollow point shape to the head, that is going to offer a lot more wind resistance. I do also think, as far as deformation, the one that will probably see the most deformation from would be the Crosman Destroyer, based on its shape. Probably, I'm saying least penetration, most deformation. Probably the next most deformation would be the hollow point, followed by the least deformation, I'm guessing, will be the pointed head. Let's find out. Okay, as far as getting to my findings, it appears that what I threw out there as my preliminary guesses as to what would have the best penetration and what would have the best deformation wasn't too spot on. So let me get more specific. Number one, there were two pellets that did not make it completely through the hardcover portion of the book. This is some pretty thick cardboard here that the book cover is made out of. But the two pellets that did not make it through and did not penetrate into the pages at all were the pointed and the hollow point. The one that did make it through the cover was the Crosman Destroyer, this one here. Now, as far as deformation goes, the pointed and then the side and then the head on. Extremely good deformation, extremely good compressed shape. It did retain some of its pointed shape, holding it where it would be pointing straight up as a newly loaded pellet. With that particular pellet, I would say it would make an extremely good hunting pellet that's going to do a lot of damage. Let's look at that hollow point. I'm going to show this. Gosh darn it, I wish I could get this to focus better. But from the side, pointing up, if it were a new pellet, it would be pointing up. But it really mushroomed and folded over very nicely. That's the head of the pellet. Again, side view of the pellet and the back of the pellet. Penetrated through the cover, but not into any of the pages, just like the pointed pellet. Quite honestly, let's admit that that's exactly, you know, what a hollow point should do. That's what I expected to see. A better deformation from the hollow point than from the pointed pellet. The pointed pellet, obviously, you know, the design feature is more for penetration. Now, as far as shooting into this textbook, it didn't offer any more penetration than the hollow point. And the hollow point was, again, just shooting for the center of this particular square. It might have been a little bit high, but was extremely accurate. So that gets us to the last pellet, which was the Crosman Destroyer. Now again, while I have this up here, pointing this out, shooting for the red line, shooting for the center of the red line, which would probably be maybe 1/8 of an inch over from where I hit. This was probably the most accurate out of the three pellets, over 10 yards. It's not very far, but I do want to point that out. And as far as penetration, where I thought that this would give the least penetration, but the most deformation, it actually gave the most penetration out of the three pellets. This one made it through the cover, and approximately, I believe it was 34 pages into the book was the Destroyer. Now, all I was able to recover of the Destroyer it looks to me more like a piece of shrapnel but it's extremely deformed. It's actually folded over in some respects. I can't really tell what would be considered the back end of the pellet, what would be considered the head of the pellet. I do believe that there are small fragments of the pellet that, you know, have sheared off, which, you know, with that extra penetration that this gave, you know, would not surprise me. I would say the one, you know, the one I was certainly the most surprised by and pleased by the performance was the Crosman Destroyer. I would say followed by a very close second that I was pleasantly surprised by was the Premier Hollow Point. The deformation on that was extraordinary, and what the Hollow Point offered versus the pointed pellet. And I would say probably the Hollow Point, actually based on the opening on the inside of the cover that the pellet created, that the Hollow Point offered, it came very close to going through the cover, whereas up here, you have the pointed pellet. So, completely off in my pre-shooting opinions of what each pellet was going to do. But, you know, if I had to pick one of the three, if I was going out hunting right now, and based on what I saw over this test, I would probably grab the Crosman Destroyers. First, what I would do is test this, do some shooting at longer ranges, and see if that accuracy of the Destroyer holds up. So, that's it. That's the test. Again, as I said, everyone, you know, a lot of opinion about the Crosman Hollow Point Premiers. A lot of people that I've, you know, heard from on YouTube and have read about on different forums. You know, it is commonly a pellet that performs very well in a variety of guns. It's economical. It's cheap. The Destroyers, that would be something I would have to look up and do some more looking into as far as cost of the three pellets. I would, off the top of my head, guess, you know, that the Hollow Points are probably the overall average priced cheapest out of the three. They don't really have any, you know, marketing gimmick, so to speak, behind them. You know, they're just a domed hollow point pellet. There's no special small point, you know, sticking out a little bit farther that's going to give you the... those are pointed out on the tin as being pointed premium grade. Now, the hollow points are marketed specifically as a hunting pellet. So, as far as their description, as to the individual quality of the pellet, that varies some from the Crosman pellet to Crosman pellet, depending on the shape of the pellet. You start getting into different, you know, shapes, getting away from your common Diablo-shaped rounded head, tapered skirt shape. And, you know, there's But with all that said, the summation is I was really pleasantly surprised with the Crosman Destroyer performance. Again, hopefully when there's warmer weather and I can get out in my backyard and shoot over, I've got about 25 yards in my backyard, do some shooting and more testing over a longer distance than the 10 yards I've got in my basement. Hopefully I could do a video on that. But I hope you learned something. I certainly did. As I said, it's good to, I wanted to express beforehand what I thought I was going to see. Didn't turn out to be what I actually did see. And that's all, you know, a part of the learning process. But really, definitely give a much higher consideration to those Crosman Destroyers if I go out, do some squirrel hunting with my backpacker and grabbing my pellet of choice. You know, certainly would not go wrong with taking a couple of each one of these pellets. But the first one I would probably, based on what I just saw, load into my gun and try to take squirrel with would be the Crosman Destroyer. So, hope you found this informational. And until I can get another video out, you guys stay safe. Shoot safe.